In the sweltering summer of 1971, Philip Zimbardo, a professor at Stanford University, set out to answer a question that has haunted philosophers for centuries. Is human evil a product of a bad apple or a bad barrel? To find the truth, he placed an ad in the local newspaper seeking mentally healthy, middle-class college students for a 2-week study on prison life. Out of 75 applicants, 24 were chosen those who showed the least amount of psychological instability or criminal tendencies. They were the good apples. They were randomly divided into 2 groups, guards and prisoners. The guards were given khaki uniforms, whistles, and mirrored sunglasses to eliminate eye contact. The prisoners were arrested at their homes by real police, handcuffed, and brought to a makeshift prison in the basement of Jordan Hall. What started as a simple role-playing exercise spiraled into a psychological nightmare in less than 24 hours. By the second day, the prisoners staged a rebellion, and the guards responded with brutal psychological warfare. They stripped the prisoners naked, placed them in solitary confinement, and forced them into degrading acts. There is no physical violence allowed by the rules, yet the guards used the power of the situation to crush the human spirit. The mirrored sunglasses acted as a mask of anonymity, allowing ordinary students to transform into sadistic oppressors. Professor Zimbardo himself became so immersed in his role as the prison superintendent that he lost sight of the ethical lines being crossed. It took an outsider, a fellow psychologist, to walk into that basement and realize that the good people had vanished, replaced by monsters and victims. The experiment, intended to last 14 days, was shut down on day 6. It proved a terrifying fact that remains true today. Our moral compass is not as fixed as we believe. It is deeply shaped by the roles we play and the power we are given. But power isn't the only thing that corrupts. Sometimes it's our inability to say no to authority. This leads us to our next disturbing discovery, the Milgram experiment. While the basement of Stanford revealed how roles define us, another experiment at Yale University uncovered something even more unsettling: our blind submission to authority. In 1961, psychologist Stanley Milgram was haunted by the trial of Adolf, a Nazi war criminal who claimed he was simply following orders. To test this, Milgram designed a study where ordinary citizens, mailmen, and engineers were told to deliver increasingly painful electric shocks to a stranger in another room. The participant was the teacher and an actor whom they believed was a fellow volunteer, was the learner. For every wrong answer, the teacher was instructed to flip a switch, increasing the voltage from 15 to a lethal 450 volts. As the voltage rose, the learner would scream, bang on the wall, and eventually go silent. When the participants, visibly trembling and sweating, looked to the experimenter in the lab coat for guidance, they were met with a cold, repetitive command. The experiment requires that you continue. The results were a shockwave to the scientific community. Despite the agonizing screams, 65% of participants, ordinary people like you and me, continued to the maximum 450 volt level, simply because an authority figure told them to do so. This study introduced the world to the agenic state, a psychological phenomenon where individuals stop seeing themselves as responsible for their actions. When acting under an authority's command, it proved that the capacity for cruelty isn't exclusive to monsters. It is a latent potential within the human psyche, triggered by the simple desire to be a good subordinate. But obedience isn't always about following a man in a lab coat. Sometimes the pressure doesn't come from above, it comes from the person sitting right next to you. To understand how easily a crowd can be manipulated, we have to look at a high school classroom in California, 1967. This was the third wave, a social experiment that proved fascism isn't a relic of the past. It's a virus that can infect anyone, anywhere, in just 5 days. In the peaceful suburbs of Palo Alto, a history teacher named Ron Jones was faced with a difficult question from his students. How could the German people claim they knew nothing about the Holocaust? To provide an answer they would never forget, Jones decided to create a movement within his classroom called the Third Wave. He started with simple rules of disciplined proper posture, sharp answers, and a strict code of conduct. He told them that through discipline, they would find strength. By the second day, the students weren't just following orders. They were embracing them. They created a secret salute and began to feel a sense of superiority over those who weren't part of the group. What started as a one-day exercise took on a life of its own. By the fourth day, the movement had grown from 30 students to over 200. The third wave members began spying on each other, reporting anyone who criticized the movement. The classroom had transformed into a mini. Jones realized he had lost control of the experiment. On the fifth day, he gathered the students and revealed the terrifying truth. There was no national movement. They had been manipulated into becoming the very thing they thought was impossible. The third wave proved that the human need for belonging and community is so strong that it can easily be weaponized to suppress individual thought and morality. If a classroom of innocent students can turn into a radical group in just 5 days, what does that say about the world we live in today? We often believe that we are the masters of our own minds, but history and science tell a different story. As we stand at the end of this dark journey into human psychology, one question remains: are we truly good people? Or are we just waiting for the right situation to reveal the shadow within? The experiments we've explored, the cold basements of Stanford, the silent laboratories of Yale, and the disciplined classrooms of Palo Alto all point to a singular, uncomfortable truth. The line between good and evil is not a wall, it is a thread. It is a thread that can be pulled by authority, by peer pressure, or by the simple desire to belong in our modern digital age. This power of this situation is more intense than ever. Social media algorithms create echo chambers that act just like the third wave, pushing us toward tribalism and we judge others from behind a screen, losing the very empathy that makes us human. But understanding this darkness is the first step toward the light. Psychology doesn't just show us how we fail. It shows us how we can resist. It teaches us that being a hero isn't about having superpowers. It's about the conscious choice to remain an individual when the crowd demands conformity. It's about questioning the man in the lab coat and looking into the eyes of the prisoner. You are not just a product of your environment unless you choose to be. The shadow lives within everyone, but so does the light of conscience. The question is, which one will you feed? Thank you for watching this deep dive into the human soul. If this journey moved you, share your thoughts below. Until next time, stay conscious and stay human.